All right. It's a privilege to be in God's house. And I say that often, and I mean it when I say it. It's a privilege to be in God's house. Hopefully, for those who are watching the live stream or will watch it, you have a much better quality this evening. The audio quality, at least for my test, is way better. It's very clear. Thank the Lord for that. Yesterday, we were able to get the speed upgraded for the upload, especially also the download, but specifically the upload speed, and it seems to have helped, which I was pretty sure it would. And also, the streams are in 720 pixels, which I know for some people might be a bit of Greek, but it's a pretty advanced video resolution. The ones that go up to the YouTube account afterwards are actually 1080p, which is even a little bit better quality. And hopefully we should be able to post those much faster. The ones on Sunday and also for Sunday morning and Sunday night took quite a bit of time to upload, and I think things will be much smoother now with the higher speed. So whether you watch them on Facebook, whether you go to the YouTube account and see a little bit better resolution, or whether you come to church and see it live in person, which is probably the best way to do it, but I know that not everyone is in the Sealyville area for one thing, and also I know that a lot of people have their churches on Wednesday nights and can't get out on Thursday. So we appreciate however it is that you are able to listen to this message, whether it's in the pews, whether it's across on Facebook or on YouTube, or however it may be. We pray that the Lord would bless every single one of you. Well, we've been studying Joseph, and Sunday morning we deviated a bit, obviously being the Sunday after Valentine's Day. Definitely wanted to look at love a bit more, but on last Thursday night, you'll recall that we preached on Joseph and God reaching people and giving a chance for a person to be redeemed, and also working in a person's life no matter the circumstance. Joseph is in a pit, sold to slavery. And then on Sunday night, talked about suffering in Joseph. The question of suffering and how God still cares about you no matter your situation, and reminded people that it is very possible to be in the absolute center of God's will and still face very adverse circumstances. But the great thing about it is, no matter how bad your circumstance is, that God is with you if you're His child. And if you study Joseph's life, you'll find this phrase: God was with Joseph. That made all the difference in the world. And when we ended on Sunday evening service, Joseph had been thrown into prison. I would say that would probably be the darkest time of just about anybody's life. Perhaps being thrown in the pit would have been right up there as well, perhaps greater or very near. But the pit was a short period of time. His brothers had pulled him out, sold him into slavery, a terrible thing. And yet now he's been thrown into prison for something he didn't do. And he's going to be there a long time. At least it appears so, and from the text we know that it's a decent amount of time. when you're in the dark times of life. Dark times sometimes last a while. I would love to tell you that the valleys of life are very short, but that's not always true. Some people go through some really dark valleys, some really hard times. Harder times than even I have went through in some cases. Sometimes they last a long time. Sometimes it's just a day or two, and then God breaks through. The lights shine bright. We're able to make it through. But that's not how it always is. Some people face medical circumstances that go on for days and months and years, sometimes lifetimes, and you begin to wonder about your situation. And here's Joseph. You look at Joseph's life and you have to wonder, what in the world is God's purpose for this man? 17 years old, when his brothers take him and cast him into a pit, and then draw him out and sell him to the Ishmaelites, where he goes to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And here he's there, and it looks like things are going well, and then he's accused of trying to lie with Potiphar's wife, which was an incredibly made-up story by Potiphar's wife. And yet now Joseph's in prison. You look at his life. He was the favorite child by Joseph, made a coat of many colors. His brothers hated him and despised him. From there he went to a pit, from the pit to slavery, from slavery to Potiphar's house, from Potiphar's house to the king's prison. That doesn't sound like a very good timeline for a lot of people. We'd say, well, that's really not the timeline I'd like to have for my life. You know, I want to talk about the time when things went really well. You know, when we made our great achievements, made a lot of money, where a lot of people noticed who we were. Those are the things that we want to shine bright. Yet those weren't the marks of Joseph's life. You know, though, in all of the vast achievements of life, we're going to read the text here in just a moment. But in all of the achievements of life, many times your greatest accomplishments for God and your greatest achievements will be when your life is the darkest. It's an amazing thing, but in reality, it's what happens. We'll take a look here. Genesis chapter 40 is where we're at. Genesis chapter 40. Give everyone a bit of time to get there, whether you're here in the service tonight or whether watching. Give some time to get to Genesis in chapter 40. It says in Genesis chapter 40 and verse 1, "And it came to pass after these things, that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt." And we'll pause for just very shortly. This is a big deal. This is the king of Egypt, often referred to as Pharaoh. Pharaoh wasn't just like a king. Pharaoh was like a god to the Egyptians. What Pharaoh said happened. If Pharaoh demanded worship, you worshiped. You did what Pharaoh said always. And if you didn't, your very life was in jeopardy. So here, the butler of the king and the baker, we don't know exactly what they did. But the king was not happy with it. I don't know if he was in a bad mood. Very well might have been. Or if they just combined together and did something absolutely dumb. But in whatever case, they made Pharaoh quite upset. Because they offended. Verse 2 says this. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. Here they are. These guys are thrown into the same prison as Joseph. They're in the same prison as Joseph because Joseph was in the king's prison. And it's actually quite interesting, and you can look at this if you choose to, if you just look back just a little bit. In Genesis chapter 37, where it tells us that in verse 36 of that chapter, 37:36, which is the last verse of the chapter, it says, And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. Very interesting. Captain of the guard. And in Genesis chapter 40, it tells us, and he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard. And in verse 4, and the captain of the guard charged Joseph with it. It's a very interesting thing. And I don't know for sure that history can tell us for sure the answer to this question. But because this, if you study ancient history of Egypt, it gets real blurry. It appears, and this may be giving some of the future story away, even though I would imagine most people listening to this stream are probably familiar with Joseph's background. But Joseph is going to become second in command. And when you study ancient Egypt, Joseph appears to have been like one of the pharaohs. This is a very hard time because the Egyptians used hieroglyphics. You were in history, you will know that is the different images and writings to portray things. But the interesting part about this is that the person that Joseph is communicating with and that sets him in charge is the captain of the guard, which we know the captain of the guard previously, and likely still at the same time, is Potiphar. Very interesting. The one that threw Joseph into prison, it's likely the same guy that has put him in charge of the prison. Now, there could have been a changeover. It could have been that there was just a captain, that this captain of the guard was just over the prison. That is probable. It could also be Potiphar himself. But however you look at it, Joseph is being example, a light in the place where he is at. You know, you many times can't control the place where you are at. Now, you might be able to, for president, you can control whether or not you're in this church tonight. You can control what house you're in this evening. You can control what workplace you go tomorrow. Now, if it's not your general place at work, you probably will find that they are not allowing you to do anything. You can control some things in life, but most things you don't have any control over. And most of the time, you have very little control on where you are in life. Some people say, well, I can just get up and move. Well, you could get up and move, but you know, you'll find that quite difficult. If you have children, you know what? You'll have to find another school. If you have a workplace, unless you have a whole lot of money in your possession, you'll find you have to find another job. Sometimes that pays significantly less than what you have. You'll find that you have to find another church to attend if you're to move. You might have to find a new set of friends. I mean, you may keep in contact with your older friends, but we all know that distance does cause relationships many times to at least dwindle slightly. You look at the different things and you find, you know what? It's real difficult for me to change my situation. You know what? A lot of times, especially if you're following God, God has you in the situation that He wants you to be in if you'll follow His will. That's why it's one of the best things in the world to follow God and His will. You say, I'm not getting anywhere where I'm at. Dead-end job going nowhere.